It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life.
In the 10 years from when Forrest first hid the treasure chest to when Forrest announced that it was found, some 300,000 people searched for it. Most of those searchers, I would argue, did not have a complete solution to Forrest's poem. What I mean by the term complete solution is a solution that, at a minimum, accounts for the 9 clues in the poem and matches those 9 clues to geographical locations on a map. In addition to the 9 clues, Forrest said that almost every word in the poem was important and that it was risky to discount any of them. So a complete solution for me would also account for almost every word in the poem. And I don't mean something vague like, well, the last 2 stanzas are just talking about legal stuff and aren't important to the solution. And the first clue doesn't appear until the second stanza, so the first stanza probably isn't important either. The poem has 6 stanzas, and that line of reasoning ignores 3 of them. My definition of almost every word isn't 50% of the words. I don't consider a solution that ignores 50% of the poem to be a complete solution. You may, I don't. For those who are of a different opinion and think that look quickly down, your quest to cease is the last clue, you don't need to point that out. I know what you're referring to, and I disagree with that interpretation. For the purpose of this video, however, it doesn't matter. Either interpretation will work. I have a long list of additional requirements for my definition of a complete solution, but none of that is important to this video either. Whether you agree or disagree with my definition of a complete solution is irrelevant to the points I'm going to make. Every searcher has their own definition of a complete solution, and for the purpose of this video, most of those definitions can be used. Now let's say that there are 1,000 complete solutions out there. The actual number is irrelevant, but let's say 1,000. Whatever your criteria for a complete solution, not all solutions are created equal. For example, let's say that there are 2 almost identical solutions, and both solutions lead to the exact same location. The single difference is that the first solution thinks that where warm waters halt is where raindrops meet the ground, while the second solution thinks that where warm waters halt is a thermal spring that the first solver did not know about. If I were to ask you to assign a grade to those definitions of where warm waters halt, one of those definitions would earn a higher mark than the other. Even though both solutions led to the same location and were identical in every way but one of the solutions fits better with the poem. One of those solutions would give you more confidence. The same thing goes for the blaze. Forrest said that, while it's not impossible to remove the blaze, it isn't feasible to try. If you forget everything you think you know about the blaze and concentrate solely on Forrest's statement, some blazes fit that statement better than others. It doesn't matter what Forrest's real blaze was. I'm not talking about Forrest's real blaze. I'm talking about going back to the statements that Forrest made about the blaze before he announced the treasure was found. If you do that, some blazes fit better than others. A carving on a tree, for example, does not fit Forrest's statement about it not being feasible to remove the blaze. Personally, I would give any solution that used a carving on a tree as a blaze very low marks. You may give it an A, I would give it an F. None of this means that where warm waters halt wasn't raindrops, and that the blaze was not a carving on a tree. It just means that I, personally, would not give those interpretations a good score. I would have next to zero confidence in a solution that used them, but that's just me. And the same thing goes for every other clue and every other line in the poem. Some interpretations fit better than others. Whether those interpretations are correct or not is not the point. What I'm moving towards here is the idea of ranking interpretations of the individual clues and lines in the poem relative to one another. So, for example, if you were to take every interpretation that has ever been mentioned of where worm waters halt, you could rank them all relative to one another and, in essence, assign a grade to each interpretation of that clue. In the same way that you can assign a grade to one of the clues or to one of the lines in the poem, you can also assign a grade to a solution as a whole. And if you were to use the same criteria to grade any two random solutions, one of the solutions would almost certainly get a better grade than the other solution. And if you were to use the same criteria to grade 1,000 solutions by 1,000 searchers, the result would almost certainly look like a bell curve. There would be a few really good solutions, a few really bad solutions, and most of the remaining solutions would be hovering somewhere around the various stages of mediocrity. Note that what I'm talking about here is solely a measure of how well solutions fit the poem, not whether solutions lead to the treasure's hiding place. This is much easier if you view all of this in prefined terms, that is, before June 5th, 2020. The goal for this exercise is not about getting the correct solution or about getting Forrest's solution. The goal is about judging solutions according to a predefined set of criteria. Arriving at the treasure's hiding place earns 0 points for this exercise. The goal is to create an objective method to measure the quality of a solution. And as long as the method and the criteria are laid out before an individual search begins, and each solution is judged by the same criteria, the grading should be mostly objective. In practice, this means, for example, that if one of the criteria is that a carving on a tree earns a grade of F, then you cannot change that grade at a later date should you find a blaze that fits whatever solution you're working on at that time. This part is vital to the success of the method. As much as possible, the criteria needs to be defined before searching begins. And after the criteria is set, it cannot be changed. This is key to helping prevent confirmation bias. Without it, the poem is your master and can lead you anywhere. With it, the poem has the potential to be under your control. If you insist on changing the criteria after the fact, then you might as well just give yourself an A before you even start. If you are already heavily invested in a solution, you probably won't be able to come up with an objective set of criteria for judging solutions. You will naturally give your favorite solution higher marks than it might deserve. A group of searchers might be able to come up with a decent grading system. That is, as long as the group did not turn out a design-by-committee set of nonsense where every idea was treated as a great idea just in order to avoid hurting anyone's feelings. Someone who has never heard of the thrill of the chase and who has yet to develop any opinions would be the most able to come up with an objective set of criteria. Okay, now let's say you take the 1,000 solutions I mentioned previously and you run those solutions through the grading system of your choice. And let's say that you end up with a bell curve and with solutions scattered along the curve. And let's say that right after you do this, Forrest's official solution gets released, and you then run Forrest's solution through that same grading system. Where do you think Forrest's solution would land on the curve? Remember, Forrest's solution earns 0 points just because it happens to lead to the treasure's hiding spot. This is solely a measure of how any given solution, even Forrest's solution, fits the poem according to an objective and predetermined set of criteria. I think it's fair to say that most searchers believed that Forrest's solution would stand head and shoulders above every other solution. While there may be other good solutions out there, Forrest's solution would not only stand alone, it would probably skew the curve. The second place solution would be nowhere in sight. Forrest's solution would account for all the seemingly important parts of his memoirs, including important literature, and No Place for Biddies, and Jumpstarting the Learning Curve, and Looking for Lewis and Clark, and Buffalo Cowboys, and Tea with Olga, and especially My War for Me. There may be some disagreement about whether your favorite minor aberration was a hint or not, but the explanations for the major ones would be there, and they would make complete sense. Forrest's solution would fill you with confidence. Forrest's solution would make you exclaim, "Why didn't I think of that?" You would understand why Forrest said that a child might have an advantage in deciphering the poem. And Forrest's interpretation of the 9 clues would flow from one to the next as if the Rocky Mountains rearranged themselves just to fit the poem. This is a perfectly reasonable expectation, and it might still turn out to be the case. For most searchers, that is. There will always be some small percentage who will never agree with Forrest's solution, no matter how good it is. Now this is where it gets interesting. There is another possibility that some may not like, but the possibility exists nonetheless. It is technically possible that, if graded against a decent set of predetermined criteria, Forrest's solution will turn out to be just another average solution. A solution that would not inspire confidence or make anyone exclaim, "Why didn't I think of that?" Whatever your personal opinion, the possibility of this being true is not zero. Again, I'm talking about fitting the solution to the poem, not about whether the solution happens to end up where the chest was hidden. It is possible that a couple searchers had grade A solutions, but that those solutions led to incorrect locations. Meanwhile, Forrest's solution may have been a grade B or a grade C solution, but it led to the correct location. That was always a possibility. Just like most searchers, Forrest was only human. When creating his poem and memoirs, Forrest was limited by his own perspective and experience. What made perfect sense to Forrest may not have made much sense to anyone else. This isn't a dig at Forrest. This is life, and it applies to everyone who has ever lived. There is a slight chance that there are a couple of solutions out there that fit the poem better than Forrest's own solution, but that do not lead to where Forrest hid the chest. I hinted at this in a previous video when I said that Forrest's knowledge of the Rocky Mountains, while it may have been extensive, was still limited. If I have hiked up a trail that Forrest did not know existed, then I have seen possibilities that Forrest did not know existed. Forrest had no way of knowing how well his words could match to somewhere that he'd never been. While I am sure that Forrest had every intent to make his solution stand out from all contenders, I am not sure that his knowledge of the Rocky Mountains was sufficient to guarantee that result. So even if I have a fantastic solution, that does not mean that it is the correct solution. Even if every single one of the 300,000 searchers agree that my solution is better than Forrest's solution, that still does not mean that mine is the correct solution. Let's say that Forrest's solution gets released and it turns out to be subpar. Meanwhile, your solution is the bee's knees and would make the world exclaim, "Why didn't I think of that?" In that scenario, which solution is the better solution, yours or Forrest's? Or to rephrase, if Forrest's solution receives a B grade and your solution receives an A grade, but the two solutions lead to different locations, which solution is the better solution? From a grading standpoint, but depending on the grading criteria used, your solution is arguably better. From a practical standpoint, the solution that led to the treasure chest is the better solution. From a practical standpoint, the solution that led to the treasure chest is the only solution that mattered. The thrill of the chase was not about finding the best solution to the poem. The thrill of the chase was about finding Forrest's solution to the poem. If you argue that Forrest's solution should have been the best solution, then I am right there with you. If you argue that Forrest's solution had to be the best solution, then we are worlds apart. That dog will not hunt. But if that situation were to occur, if Forrest's solution gets released and you think that your solution is better than Forrest's solution, I would refer you back to the quote from the beginning of this video. It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life. Maybe, in order to win Forrest's game, you really did need to view the world through Forrest's eyes. And maybe that's why it took 10 years and 300,000 searchers before the puzzle was finally solved. Thank you for watching.